but who is also a female gladiator, and one possibility doesn't rule out the other. It could be a combination of the two.
The overall evidence suggests that whether or not she was a follower of Isis, she was probably a gladiatrix. And more evidence can be found in the history of the period. The gladiatorial games were often inspired by reality, and fresh in the memory of Roman London was the vengeful wrath of a warrior queen. Just 10 years before, the British warrior queen Boadicea, or Boudica, had turned this outpost of empire into a smoking ruin. Simon James believes Boudica taught the Romans a lesson they never forgot.
Whenever Rome conquered a new province, there was, of course, inevitably a period of settling down, when there were many tensions to be sorted out as people adjusted to the new circumstances. In the case of Britain, around AD 60, things went seriously wrong because a lot of soldiers and officials got out of hand and started to beat up and abuse important Britons, and this triggered a huge explosion of resentment. Well, Queen Boudica, who had herself been flogged and her daughters had been raped by Roman soldiers, led an enormous army of aristocrats and apparently also ordinary people, over 100,000 of them, on a great campaign of vengeance and destruction, which resulted in the complete flattening of several new Roman towns in Britain, not least London itself. Very quickly, once the Romans re-established control, as they did within a few months, the city was re-established. Within a few years, the harbour was working again, and then we see the rapid redevelopment of the public buildings and the private properties, and the establishment of new institutional buildings too.
In just 10 years, Londinium was rebuilt, with control the top priority. The new amphitheatre was the focal point, providing a diversion for the increased army presence. With Boudica's memory hanging over the city, the time was ripe for the emergence of a strong female gladiator who could win glory through combat. Mike Fulford is an expert in the customs of the amphitheatre.
A successful gladiator would have earned considerable sums, and he would have retired wealthy, which allowed him to set up his own property, his family would have been secure, and in that respect he would have earned his place in society. And of course, if you survived, and we know that many gladiators did survive after many, many games, then it's as if you were a retired, I don't know, sports player, you know, you were a leading person, you were famous.
To scale the heights of Roman society was to climb to the top of the world. The empire stretched its tentacles across the globe, drawing wealth and power into Rome, along with new ideas. In Ridley Scott's epic Gladiator, the Colosseum is terrorized by female gladiators riding chariots. In real life, was this deadly attraction inspired by something the Romans saw in Britain? The movie's historical advisor was Harvard professor and classical scholar Kathleen Coleman.
There's one tiny hint that might suggest a female gladiator from Britain. We know that there were chariot-born gladiators, and in the novel by Petronius, which was written in the reign of Nero after Claudius had conquered Britain, there's a reference to, in a fictitious context obviously, a female chariot-born gladiator. Now, if the Romans, having encountered women driving chariots in Britain, as we know they did, had transferred that to the familiar context of the arena, they might have come up with the idea of having a female gladiator on a chariot.
The Romans often based their gladiatorial games on reality, and their experiences in Britain may have brought women into the amphitheatre. For 30 years, from AD 59, the records tell of women killing beasts and fighting in the ring. wild women spicing up the novelty and spectacle of the amphitheatre. London's Great Dover Street woman lived in this same period and may be the only case where archaeologists have found a female gladiator's actual remains. The ever-active volcano Vesuvius stands guard over the one other tantalizing possibility for human remains. The city of Pompeii was frozen in time during this key period of Roman history. It was engulfed by a sudden eruption of Vesuvius in August 79 AD. This is the oldest amphitheatre in the world, and gladiators must have been among the dead.
This is a porticus behind the theatre.
At around the same time that Great Dover Street woman died in London.
In these barracks, a number of skeletons were found, and 2 of those skeletons were associated with jewellery. So some people think skeletons and jewellery, the skeletons must have been female. If they were female, why were they here? Are we talking about gladiators' concubines? A contract with a local brothel? Are we talking about women just trying to escape the eruption and carrying their worldly wealth with them? There may be another explanation.
When the amphitheatre was first excavated over 200 years ago, there was little interest in the possibility of female skeletons.